David here with Figboot on pens, back again with another fountain pen review. It seems lately there have been a number of revivals in the pen world, and today I have a review for you from another brand which closed up shop within the last 5 or 6 years, but has been revived by one of its founders. That company is Delta, and the pen I have for you today is the Delta DV Original. Thanks go out to the good folks at Jaffa Brands, the U.S. distributors for Delta, as well as several other brands, for providing this pen for review. Now, Delta has some interesting company history. The company was originally founded back in 1982 by 3 partners. There was Nino Marino, Ciro Matrone, and Mario Musente. Their goal was to create pens that called back to the glamour of the 20s and 30s. Their flagship model was the Dolce Vita. This one here was a standard Dolce Vita. This particular one had a very odd feature of a steel nib with a gold piece stacked on top, which they claimed increased ink flow. This has been the only Delta pen that I've reviewed on this channel. I have 2 other Deltas in my collection, which I will show you here shortly, but I never got around to reviewing those. I have a Dolce Vita oversized, as well as a Stantufo Oro, both of which I care for greatly. I think I haven't reviewed them because the company closed its doors back in 2017, and sometimes I'm hesitant to review pens which aren't actively available on the market. But the pen I have for you today is on the market, and that is because one of the 3 founders has revived the brand. After Delta, 2 of the founders went on to create brands you are probably familiar with. Nino Marino is the man behind Mayora, and Ciro Matrone created Leonardo. I'm uncertain if the 3rd founder is still in the pen business. It's my understanding that Nino purchased the old Delta inventory as well as the equipment, so I believe these new pens are being made on the same equipment as the original models. Okay, enough of that. Let's actually take a look at a pen. It arrives in this box, and inside we have the actual box. The lid flips open, and inside we have some documentation, and there we have the pen. This is the Delta DV Original. When you think of a Delta pen, this is the iconic color scheme that comes to mind. The black cap and the tip here on the end with the orange crushed resin barrel. Now, I forget the technical term for this resin making technique, but essentially you make some resin, you break it up into small pieces and chunks, and put that back in a mold with some fresh resin, and you end up with this. I will say that there are several crushed resins that I just don't care for the looks of. It's typically not my favorite look, but I've always liked what Delta has done with this material. I think it looks really sharp. Now, this DV is very similar to the previously produced Delta models. I will show you a side-by-side comparison during the writing sample, but there are a lot of similarities. I will say that it truly feels like just another Delta rather than someone trying to imitate a Delta, which is a good thing. I've seen this pen with a couple of different names. On most sites, it's listed as the DV or the DV Original or the DV Original Midsize. But I've also seen it on sites as the Dolce Vita 2.0. I believe that's more based on the specific retailer rather than Delta being inconsistent in its marketing. Let's start by taking a look at the top of the cap. There, the metal inlay is stamped with the company logo. This transitions into the clip. It begins wide and tapers down to a wheeled end. I do find this clip to be a little less stiff than those on my original Deltas, which is nice. That added flexibility helps accommodate varying thicknesses of material. On the back of the cap, it is engraved with the company name and the name of this particular pen. The cap angles up at an even rate of incline until you reach the end, where we have a couple of things. It's engraved with the number of this pen and Italy, where these pens are manufactured. These pens are not necessarily a numbered edition, but Delta has traditionally numbered their pens. Then below that, we have the cap band. On the original Delta models, there were two different styles of cap bands. One was steel and laser engraved, and the other was sterling silver and stamped. I always felt their laser engraved bands really cheapened the looks of those models, so I'm glad to see that they're using the sterling silver bands for these new models. I think it looks really classy and sharp. And I'll show you in the size comparisons, but I really like how the ones on my existing pens have patinaed. Now, one thing that bugs me a little bit is the Sterling 925 stamp on mine is upside down in relation to the rest of the text on the cap. Now, admittedly, this is a very minor nit to pick, and it's something I didn't even notice until I took some macro pictures. I'll show you this during the size comparisons, but the older Delta models also had an official national mark of Italy stamp on the silver, which is not present on this new model. I don't know enough about silver making to say what that exclusion means, though. The end of the cap is rounded, making for a smooth step down between the cap and the barrel. Now, at first it seems like this cap is straight, but that's not the case. It actually angles up about 1 millimeter from here to here, with the thickest part of the barrel being near the back end. At the end, there is a band which angles down to this black resin piece, and the very end of this pen is slightly rounded. The cap twists off in 1 1/4 rotations, and underneath we have a number 6 stainless steel nib, laser engraved with the company name and the logo. This nib is available in extra fine, fine, medium. There's a 1.1 stub. There is a flex extra fine as well as a flex fine. And here's a look at the plastic feed. The resin section begins with a flare and angles up to the threads and a smooth transition to the remainder of the barrel. Deltas have typically had a rather healthy section, and this one here is no exception. I personally prefer a section with a bit of girth, and I find this one to be very comfortable in my hand. The pen is plenty long enough to use unposted. The cap does post, and while it does post securely, it doesn't post that deeply. Even though there is a large metal band, the cap is rather light, so I don't feel it backweights the pen or throws off the balance, but I do think it looks rather peculiar perched on the end there, so I prefer to use this pen unposted. This is a cartridge converter pen. It accepts standard international cartridges, and a converter is provided. With the metal that's contained within this barrel, eyedropping would not be recommended. There is also a version of this pen which is a piston filler as well, and that model runs about $100 more than this particular one does. Speaking of price, the Delta DV Original Midsize is available from a number of retailers and sells for around $235. I feel that that is a reasonable price for what you receive with this pen. I was impressed with how similar this pen is to the previous production models. There are some very minor differences, but it is very true to the original production. If you are looking to add a Delta to your collection, I personally wouldn't be concerned about whether it was the new Delta or the old one. They are virtually the same, which is again a good thing. And I'm glad that they have returned. Okay, now it is time for some measurements, size comparisons, and a writing sample. Okay, here we go with some size comparisons for the Delta DV Original. To begin with, I wanted to show you what it looked like with this is the Stantufo Oro, which is a piston filler, which is slightly larger. And then here it is with the Dolce Vita Oversized, and so it's almost the same size, but you can see that it's a little bit thicker. But you can see that the resins are very similar to what they had been using previously. But I wanted to show you some other comparisons. First of all, you can see the band. Try not to get the light in here, but you can see how this band has patinaed over the years. And I actually think it looks really nice with that patina on it. The clips are virtually identical. The tops are virtually identical. The only thing that I noticed was, this is probably just a minor thing, but the brushing on this particular, on the older one was straight up and down and really aligned. But then the brushing on this other one is like at 1 o'clock. It's just like off a little bit. The most of the other things are virtually identical. I did notice that on the newer model, this piece right here is just slightly larger. It's just a slightly larger piece. In regard to the nibs, that they look to be a little bit, they might be a different manufacturer. That I think that these were Bach and that these look like Yovo. But you'll see here on the writing sample that they perform very nicely. But you can see that they are virtually identical. And then even have different feeds. Because before, I believe that's an ebonite feed, and then this one is a plastic feed. Oh, also one other difference. This one is actually on a gold nib that is on this oversized. So I believe that's why it has the ebonite feed there. In regard to these size comparisons, let's get these back up here with the oversize and the Stantufo Oro. And then here it is with a Lamy Studio, which is significantly thinner. In regard to some non-Delta pens, we have a Wancher Dream pen, and this is the titanium. Actually, all three of these pens are pens that you're going to see reviewed coming up here in the somewhat near future. This is a pen from the Good Blue, which is available through Van S that has a nice flex nib on it. And finally, something special I received from Conway Stewart, which is their Alan Turing pen. There's a lot going on with this particular pen, and I really like the looks of it. So I'm looking forward to kind of dissecting this one, and it even has a little secret in the pen that you'll see during the review. But that is what it looks like in comparison to the Delta DV. In regard to uncapped comparisons, this is what it looks like with the oversized, and then this is what it looks like with the Good Blue, and then this is what it looks like with the Wancher Dream pen. Okay, here we go with the writing sample for the Delta. This is going to be the DV Original mid-size. And this is a medium stainless steel nib. And with an orange pen like this, obviously I had to use an orange ink. And this is one of my favorites, which is Ackerman Orange Bovin. This is what the ink looks like. It's one of my favorite vibrant oranges, along with Mont Blanc's Lucky Orange, and then something I fairly recently reviewed, which was the Andorilium Flapjack Octopus Orange, which is another really nice vibrant orange. This is what the Ackerman bottles look like if you haven't seen them. They have a feature that I really like. They're one of my favorite ink bottles, and you can see here that there is a clear ball that's in the neck. So what you do is turn it over and fill it up, and then when you turn it over there, a bunch of ink is captured here in this top container, in this top section, and then when you take off the cap, then you have plenty of ink to ink up your pen. It's just a really cool and unique design. And here we go with the rest of the writing sample. I'd say that this nib is a bit on the stiff side. You're not going to get a lot of line variation out of here, even if you press it. The ink flow is decent for a medium, and I'd say it has a fair amount of good feedback. It doesn't feel scratchy at all, but you can feel a bit of feedback with this in regard to reverse writing. It's a little scratchy, and you can see that that was just a little spotty. But in regard to some fast writing, the feed keeps up well. So there we have the Delta DV Original Midsize. As I mentioned before, I think that this is pretty true to the original Delta pens, and that I was a big fan of the original Delta pens, and I'm glad to see that they've made a comeback. And not only did they make a comeback, but I'm glad to see that they essentially got everything right on this pen in regard to matching what they did previously, which I was a fan of it, like I said. Okay, until next time, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.